Sean Levine will step into the cage with Brendan Tobin in Are You Here on Tapped Out?
That's right, fight me like a man.
Only on the BetQL network.
You know the rules. I want a good, clean fight. When I tell you to break, I want you to step back out my command and break. Now go back to the corner and come out fighting at the bell.
That is true. The segment is called You Gonna Fight Me, where I make Brendan Tobin look like a fool for the next 15 minutes here on the BetQL network. We were just talking, BT, about Ryan Garcia and his suspension. I could see in the next year why he's suspended, maybe that crossover fight that they were talking about with Sean O'Malley, where I don't know how you'd pull it off. It's unsanctioned. I don't know if maybe you'd have to come back from suspension first. Honestly, those two guys, I'm kind of joking here, but I'm kind of not, only because both those guys have a different following. They've both got such big internet and Twitter following where that would work if Dana would let it work. You going to fight me?
I'm not going to fight you on I would be intrigued by it, but I don't understand. I think that Ryan Garcia is under the impression that Dana White can just go against the athletic commissions. Like, they still have to be licensed to fight in these sport. Like, when you go fight an MMA match,
Slice style backyard in Miami.
Well, yeah, but then Dana's not going to let Sean O'Malley do that. Like, that's the issue, you know? Like, if he wants to go fight, you know, somebody in maybe bare knuckle, I guess, yeah, down in Miami, but these guys, they have to bow to we talk about all the time, these judges. Why do these judges not go anywhere? Why is it the same people? Why? It's a government entity. They don't have to go anywhere. They're in the system. And these sports, maybe the UFC doesn't have to bend to it anymore because they've gotten so big, but that's regulated. Like they had to be legalized in New York, just 7 years ago? So I don't know why Ryan Garcia seems to think he can go fight UFC. Like, he can't.
So when people always tell me the government sucks and I don't pay any attention to what they're talking about the UFC judges? That's what they mean? Because now I agree with them.
Yes. That's the only thing we can all come together on is America. UFC judging and MMA judging and boxing judging sucks.
Can I get Sal D'Amato's ass out of there? That guy's cost me so much money in the UFC. All right, we were talking about backyard fighting in Miami. Jorge Masvidal comes to mind. You got the boxing matchup versus Nate Diaz around the corner. You're going to fight me if I say, in the UFC, Jorge Masvidal has a better highlight reel than Nate Diaz.
Wow. That's a great question. Because if you think about it, Jorge's got one of the most iconic knockouts of all time.
I would
There's
say
nothing like
I'll put it at the very top.
But
I'd say it's the most famous. Maybe not the most famous. It's the coolest knockout of all time.
There's only one guy who first beat Conor McGregor, though, dude. Only one guy to squeeze him out and tap him out. So what would you put on top, man? I think I got to go Nate, and Jorge's my guy, but. Wow. I think I got to go Nate. Nate, choking out Conor McGregor, the biggest thing in the sport. When he did that, when nobody thought that he was going to do that, and he had to say, hey, I'm not surprised, mother, you know what's? Yeah. I got to go with Nate.
Thought you were going to get us kicked off the radio there for a second. Glad you stopped yourself. Yeah, that moment was great. Even in losses with Nate, it's like his fight versus Leon comes to mind, where he's standing there and pointing to him, and everybody knows he's probably about to lose the fight, and everybody's still like, oh, how much of a badass is this guy, Nate Diaz? Masvidal, now that I think about it, had a little bit of that too, where early on in his career, he was kind of, I don't want to say journeyman, but winning some fights and losing some fights, and then he just had that incredible year. The knockout of Darren Till was pretty good too.
Yeah, I remember I was at AT&T Stadium. I was watching it on an iPad because I was getting ready for Errol Spence, Mikey Garcia, and then all that drama went down with him and Leon with the 3-piece and a soda. That was the start to something special for him, but I don't know if it tops, because Nate really became a superstar from that. And then if you really think about it, yes, the Askren knockout was huge, but then Jorge winning the BMF belt really concluded all that. So beating Nate, ergo, was kind of like his cherry on top of becoming an uber star.
Another Nate highlight that comes to mind, I don't remember who it was, Remember when he had the guy in a leg lock and the fight was over with? Both guys were on the ground, and before it was actually over, he gave him double fingers. I'm
Yes.
trying to think of who it was, and it was a long, long time ago. Yeah, Nate. How about Nate or Nick Diaz? Better highlight reel.
Because what it comes to mind with Nick is just shenanigans. Like, it's just, that's all that immediately just comes to my head. So I'm still going to go Nate.
I think Nate's probably the one too. Earlier today, the fights happened in Saudi Arabia. If you missed it, Bobby Knuckles, Robert Whittaker by knockout in the main event. Good for you if you cashed that ticket. I think that the broadcasting crew today was the best three they could possibly have on the microphone. That's Anik, Bisping, and Daniel Cormier. You gonna fight me?
No, I'm not going to fight you. I think that's a pretty good mix. I like Cruz every now and then too. I think he does a good job. I think Paul Felder does a good job. I will say, the Rogan crew, I just, and I kind of get why this has happened, but it's kind of like with Rogan. I think Rogan just becomes so famous. It just feels like he comes into these fights now, and Rogan really, I feel like, used to do his homework. And I just feel like this is a man so busy. It's like we have this really famous guy who's here in the booth with us, but he's almost like decided a narrative of fight in the first round. It's just not like it used to be with Joe, and that's fine. It happens. Not every broadcaster stays as sharp as they used to be. But I actually honestly enjoy it. One, I feel like Anik gets to shine a little bit more when he's there with DC and Rogan. I feel like he's almost not on the broadcast enough. And then this one I think is just really good. I like Michael Bisping. I love a Brit on a broadcast. DC's funny. John Anik. So no, I'm not going to fight you on that. I think we've arrived at yes, they're the best.
About time. And I echo everything that you just said about Joe Rogan. By the way, he's maybe the most famous person on the planet, or like in the top 10, to also be calling UFC fights. You can't expect him to be what he was. And he was still super famous 15, 20 years ago, whenever he got into this thing, and did a great job. I clearly think we can all tell that he's not at the top of his game anymore, and that's okay.
I think it's okay. And I will say, look, his podcasts, when he still has fighters, are still among the best. Like, I love, because you can get, there's not many places you're going to get a fighter for 2.5 hours. And you can tell when they're on a platform like that, like they want to tell their story and give the goods. So I still think he's a benefit to the sport in that way. I just don't think he is what he was. And I think that's just the case of, how could you be? You're running one of the biggest shows in the world.
Yeah, no, I would say, as far as places to hear big fighter interviews, besides us right here on the BetQL network on Tapped Out, he's probably the second best. I agree with you when it comes to fighter interviews. Speaking of fighters, Kamaru Usman says that he was scared to fight Jorge Masvidal back in the day. You're going to fight me if I say Kamaru Usman at this point in his career is never going to fight for a title again?
I just don't know. Yeah, I don't know where that opportunity is going to break through for him, because it feels like if it's going to happen, it needs to be like somebody pulled out, like it's going to be a last minute, hey, Kamaru, can you fight for the 185 belt? Because, Robert Whittaker's not on schedule, Sean Strickland. So, yeah,
should have stepped up and fought Robert Whittaker today in Saudi.
He's too busy. He's a big Panthers fan, dude. He doesn't want to miss the Stanley Cup. Have you seen him cage side with Jalen Waddle?
Hockey.
He's been ringside with Jalen Waddle.
Okay. Well, yeah, I wouldn't want him to disrupt his day job by going to watch a Panthers team that's about to blow the NHL Stanley Cup in 7 games. Colby Covington and Usman fought a couple of times. Colby says that the reason that he's not fighting Ian Machado Gary is because, well, he doesn't think Machado has earned the fight. You're going to fight me if I say, if that went down, Colby would get beat up. Ian Gary would beat the brakes off of Colby Covington. I'm so down on Colby.
Yeah, I am too, which is a shame because, I think that, Colby, with all his shenanigans too, like, he is a guy, I think that it's almost underrated what a good fighter he is. But I just think, yeah, he's had his wars. He's just not as good. And honestly, dude, I am more excited about Ian fighting MVP. I think that's a great fight. I think it's kind of getting slept on for next week for the card because, MVP, great striker, fun striker. Ian Machado Gary, really, really fun striker. you kind of have this star-making moment for either one of those guys because it feels like whoever wins that, okay, you're going to actually do some things here, and the other one, you might have to take a step back. So I think it's a great matchup, and I'm glad that we're getting that instead of the Colby fight.
I actually like the whole card next week. It sucks that we don't get McGregor Chandler, but they moved it around, and now we got Ortega. We'll talk about that. We've got the rematch between Pereira and it's a good card. It went from being a Conor McGregor card and a bunch of other dudes. Yuri Prochazka was the name I was trying to dig out there. And now we've got like a really good card, at least the main, I would say 5 or 6 fights. We'll break them down and give you the odds coming up here in just a little while on Tapped Out. Jared Gordon earlier today, I think he was completely robbed. I can't stand when I lose fights on split decisions. I'm still bitter about it, even though it's been 3.5 hours. You're going to fight me if I say UFC would be better if they had open scoring.
I'm always torn on this just because I don't want to see guys not engage, and if they knew, would they duck? I think that's probably that's probably a bigger issue in a 5-round fight than it would be a 3-round fight because those are typically closer. But then again, you never know what the other element of is a guy going to put his foot on the gas. So I'm still okay with scoring being secret, but I just wish we just had a better grasp on what these guys cared about and what it all meant, because it just feels like it's a wild card every which way. Because even if it was open, and we know how wrong a guy is, like, how does that help a guy being bad at his job? Because by the end of it, we all know who's bad at their job. It's not like it's a secret. It's all disclosed on who are the bad judges, but we keep getting bad cards. So, like, do we expect such and such? Sal D'Amato scores the wrong guy 10-9. Is Dana White supposed to go and reprimand him in the middle of the fight? Like, what happens? I don't know.
And that's why I was saying earlier in the show, have it be more than 3. I mean, and I know that we're talking about UFC fights, but ultimately, as you pointed out earlier, it's the well-being of the fighters themselves. And it's a very dangerous sport, right? And so these guys are putting, obviously, when we say they're putting their life on the line, they literally are. And us as gamblers, it's the BetQL network. We talk about betting. You and I bet on all the fights, right? I bet every single day. And it's incredibly frustrating that we're the ones at the bottom of the funnel that have to deal with this. So instead of complaining about it every single week, I'll throw out a suggestion. Instead of having 3 judges and 2 of the 3 decide, okay, that's enough, right? That's a democracy. That determines who wins. Make it 9 judges, right? Make it 11. It would obviously have to be an uneven number because the last thing you want is 10 judges. You get it 5 and 5. And I see you rolling your eyes. And as I say it, I'm kind of rolling my own eyes because that sounds a little bit ridiculous.
I appreciate you trying.
2 out of 3 is stupid, especially if it's our boy Sal D'Amato. He screws it up every time.
I appreciate you trying, but like, where my mind goes to? You remember where my mind goes to? You remember when like the NFL had replacement refs for like, a bit of the season, and they were terrible. Like they always just, they really exposed like, oh, well, we think the refs are bad, but wow, when you see refs who are not up to the snuff, really bad.
No, they
so now you're adding more.
We're already at that level.
But you're going to add what I'm saying is you're going to add replacement judges. You're going to add people. You think you're going to add better people. I'm telling you, you're probably going to end up adding worse people.
Not possible. In the UFC, when it comes to judges, that is one thing that is not possible, dude. They are so bad. They get it wrong so often. Look, in the Jared Gordon fight earlier today, I was texting you guys back and forth about how I lost money because of the judges, and I was so upset, and he was a plus 240 underdog and all these different things. And then Jake texted me back, yeah, you're right. I had Gordon my split decision. You decided to leave it alone because you get annoyed by me when I text you. But then on the radio, you're like, yeah, no, I agree with you. Then we bring on Eddie Law from Cage Eyes Press. He says he agrees with us. I bet I could bring on 10 other people in a row, and they would all agree, which would mean 15 out of 15. And yet we're going to lose money on it as a gambler because 2 out of 3 idiots couldn't decide it right? Dude, it's not replacement referees. We're already dealing with the replacement referees. Our level of referee compared to the NBA or NHL or Major League Baseball It's not even close. Yeah, people complain. Angel Hernandez had to retire a couple of weeks ago because he sucks so bad at calling balls and strikes. It happens. But most of the time, it doesn't, and they get it right. And I'm actually pretty impressed, especially in the NFL. In the UFC, this happens every single week, BT. And it's costing people money.
What I think should happen, and yeah, it's a big fair because they take a lot of gambling money. And
a lot of gambling. I think the UFC, second most bet on sport behind the NFL, combat sports.
Yeah, and I think that the other way that they should probably go is usually in a situation like that, they got to have a review system probably for a long time. And then maybe, the UFC establishes who the better people are for it, but they probably need to go in some kind of manner to clean those things up.
Brendan Tobin and the Sports Machine talking a little fighting, making a little more money, and we're going to preview UFC 303 coming up right here on the BetQL Network.